welcome to the second podcast of AzureTalks. I'm here with Joey Hofstede, Design Authority on Azure from Cegeka. Hello, Joey.
Hello, nice to be here.
I'm here with Koos, Security Consultant at Wortell.
Hi Rolf, nice to be here.
And Maarten, Chief Ninja Cat or Chief Nerd, as you called yourself just a minute ago. Maarten, Cybersecurity Director at Wortell. Welcome.
Good to see you again, Rolf.
And we're here in Seattle at Microsoft Ignite. How's the experience at this moment for Microsoft Ignite, Joey?
How do you say that? It's a very different setup if you look at the previous Ignites. But for now, it's okay. I was very honored and pleased to hear the keynote from Satya. But the rest, it's, pick and choose, different setup. Yeah, still have to cope with that. Well.
Yeah, so to elaborate a little on security later, but it was quite obvious that Satya did talk about security, about the 6 pillars of security, which is Entra, Purview, Priva, some more stuff in there, just calling 3 of 6 of them because I don't want to address all the topics because we have nothing to talk about later. But any interesting stuff on the security side, Koos?
Definitely. Security is a big topic, obviously, for Microsoft last years. So it's great to see new announcements, like Defender for DevOps was interesting for me personally. And also, obviously, improvements in endpoint security, like endpoint privilege management was an interesting feature, I think. And Defender for Smart Screen saw some nice demos on that. So it's great that they improve further on, and also outside standard IT, they're also now incorporating OT environments with Defender for OT and incorporating that to Sentinel. So that's also nice. Yeah. Good things security-wise.
Yeah, and another topic that is around Ignite this year is the Microsoft Cloud for Industries. So I know you had asked the expert meetings, Maarten, about multi-environment, multi-cloud. So obviously, Microsoft Cloud for Industries will be incorporated within that kind of topics. Using the announcement that Microsoft did here at Ignite, the Microsoft Security portfolio is growing, obviously, and Microsoft is kind of going towards doing more with less. How does that go for security? Can we go with less security?
Well, I'm not sure if they mean doing less security. I think the challenge we're seeing in the cyber security world is that we don't have enough people to respond to all of the threats that are coming at us and at all of the companies. And that's not new. It's been around, of course, since the beginning, and many other industries have the same problem. But the shortage is really there in cyber. And you see it in understaffed security operations centers, or maybe professionals that need to govern their environment but don't have the time because of all of the running tasks they're doing. So I think how they're trying to tell us is we need to do it differently, make sure that we use the technology to our advantage to make sure that we don't only need to add people to the equation. And one of the investments I guess Microsoft is doing for already a couple of years, and to my view is doing very successfully, is that they're investing both in automation, so making sure that we do repetitive work not by humans but by computers, and secondly invest in machine learning, or AI as they're calling it, making sure that we try and figure out like the outliers in certain data or whatever that triggers then an alert, instead of trying to view 1,000 alerts and trying to find a needle in the haystack. So to me, looking at Satya's keynote, the doing more with less was really about how do we take technology to our advantage and still be very, very secure to the future.
So what you're actually saying is that it could be a problem-solving thing about the war on talent. So not upscaling only people, but using technology to leverage doing more with the same or with less.
Yes, because technology is everywhere. Every part of our life is technology, and it's only becoming more and more. We're still with a lot of humans on this earth, but looking at our economies, both in the Netherlands, but here in the US and around the world, shortages are everywhere. And certainly with people retiring and new workforce coming in, make sure we do things efficiently, make sure we use technologies to our advantage. So I think investing in things like automation and machine learning are very important. And it's not only security. I find it very interesting in the keynote that it's everywhere. Like from I don't know, Microsoft Designer building like new pictures with DALL-E.
Nice demos.
Those were nice demos, right?
Yeah.
And I think ML and AI is everywhere, isn't it?
I was also amazed about Copilot features on GitHub, where with natural language you can construct pieces of code, or that code is automatically completed. So if you start a certain loop, a Visual Studio can complete that loop for you. It's also it saves a lot of time. Obviously, it's amazing to see those examples.
So I guess we're all excited that we're going to try and implement these kind of stuff back when we are back in the Netherlands.
Of course.
Obviously, in the Netherlands we are competitors with each other, but in the community we are all friends.
Sure.
Do you see any use cases for things that you have seen here today or that you have seen yesterday?
Obviously, the Defender for endpoint stuff will definitely going to use that. That's a big topic, and I'm personally more working with the Sentinel product specifically. So where Maarten mentioned automation is a big factor in that. I will continue doing that, of course. There weren't very big announcements around Sentinel for now, but I know there's some other stuff coming from that pipeline in the future. But yeah, of course. Leverage making it even more secure.
Oh, and interesting about Ignite, and Joey said already, like everybody's trying to figure out how does this new format work? How does the hybrid format work? But also traditionally, and we're starting to sound very old, I get you, but 10 years ago or so, Ignite or TechEd or IT Forum or what have you were conferences where Microsoft deliberately waited for to announce products or services that were coming out in the near future. And today it is a marker in the year where everybody's living towards, where they're bundling news, but that news might be something from the past weeks, it might be something from today, or it might be announcements coming in the future. And I think some of these things even are already available as a private preview or a technology preview. And so it's not like I didn't go to Ignite to say, okay, I'll watch all these announcements and then figure out next week what to do with them. To me, it's really bundling the news and making sure we already understand what they're working towards. And then, through all of the other means that you have as an MVP or a customer connection program or private previews, I think you already seen a bit of it. But trying to figure out what to do with it, that was a lot. If you look at the Microsoft Booked news, there was a lot this week, wasn't there, Joey?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's also a celebration, perhaps, that something from preview is now general available as of Ignite. And we all know that customers of ours sometimes are a little bit hesitant on using the private preview or the public preview features. And now they can finally embrace that and move forward with it, now that they also get support on those, of course.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. All right, no big announcements on Sentinel. Talk security here. Joe, you're more of an infrastructure and platform kind of guy. We have seen a lot of talks around Azure Arc, and
yes,
well, that's like the connection between those worlds, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Azure Arc, for instance. I never thought that, in the light of business I do, is that you have old school on-prem data centers. You go to a data center migration program with Microsoft, and you migrate all the stuff to Azure.
Yeah.
And go with the flow with all I call it the framework of Microsoft. They make your work more fun than the old days. So now I work at Cegeka. I don't have anything to do with on-prem environments. There's a but. Azure Arc. And I can see that my colleagues at Cegeka are having troubles coping with the mindset of Azure. The management plane is Azure. So you have the old school and the modern world. We have a big challenge with Cegeka trying to connect those worlds together with Azure Arc. So that's something they repeated this message the last couple of months. Azure Arc. So,
but it's amazing, right, that you see it extend even more. So now that you can not only apply policies via Arc from the Azure cloud to your on-prem servers, but also do guest configuration and make certain changes so that you control everything from out of Azure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I think that's the next
and
step.
I think that if you look closely at what they're saying through all of these months, it's really where Microsoft decided almost like this will be our conduit for the future.
Wake up call.
This is like Azure Arc will be our highway through which we will work with all sorts of other places outside of public Azure. And they're pushing for it, because if you look at the new Microsoft Defender for servers, it's not going to be a separate agent anymore. Going forward, they will leverage Azure Arc. You will be deploying some form of Azure Arc to make sure you get Defender for servers. And through Azure Arc, of course, we can govern more and more. But I think anything from data, infrastructure, security, manageability will flow through Azure Arc. And so skill sets also like Kubernetes will become more and more important for people that don't have those skills yet, because a large part of infrastructure within Azure Arc also relies on Kubernetes and technology around Kubernetes. So I think that if you're now in infrastructure, learn Azure Arc, learn Kubernetes, because those things will be coming at you.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that was an interesting talk that we had yesterday. So we're talking Azure Kubernetes, and obviously today we saw Mark Ribovic talking about Azure Container Instances.
Yeah, ACI.
For like May last year, there's like a taste in between, right? Talking container apps.
Container apps.
And we were just talking earlier this morning about how many flavors Microsoft actually is introducing, where more and more management is being done by Microsoft itself. So you see that they are growing from the infrastructure, they're stepping aside from the infrastructure level. So virtual machines, obviously, they exist and they need to be existent for the upcoming years. Containerization is the future. And you see that all those management planes and management levels more and more is going towards Microsoft. Today in the keynote this morning, we saw that we've passed the trillion part of security events going through Microsoft each month. Do you think that on a security level, Microsoft will also be doing more and more for their customers and their partners? Or is that something that will always remain a responsibility of customers and partners itself? Because it's like there is a thin line between where the responsibility lies talking about security, right?
Yeah, I think it's a shared responsibility, and it depends on what level you look at it. For example, the virtual machines, and I think Microsoft has extensive documentation about this as well, where the lines, where they draw the line about responsibility. If you enable a virtual machine with a public IP on the internet with public-facing RDP, you should take better care of that if your machine is hacked, obviously. But yeah, to come back to your previous point, the intelligence they gather from all those events, is it from the Azure portal or Microsoft 365 or even Hotmail, for example? Those threat intelligence feeds are now also available to ingest into your Sentinel environments. So you can leverage from their experience and their insights that way.
And it's interesting because Koos and I were fortunate enough to visit the Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center on Monday here in Redmond on their campus. And those are interesting teams. They are really big teams working with their core platforms like Azure 365 and what have you to, like you said, process a large number of signals and try and make sense of all of that. But the curated feed, like Koos said, will be available to you. Sometimes seamless. It will just pop up and tell you in your, Outlook that something was blocked because Defender for Office actually already blocked it. Or like in Sentinel, if you want to work with that data and build your own use cases. But having that feed is actually quite impressive, because it used to be in the past that you'd call up like commercial companies, pay a lot of money, and I'm talking like hundreds of thousands of euros to get such a feed that they worked on. And now Microsoft, the biggest almost now security company in the world, gives that, not for free, you're paying for Sentinel, you're paying for the products, but it's there, you're not paying extras anyway. And I think that's a good thing. But on what Koos said with the shared responsibility, that's an interesting thing, because on one hand, they want to make it so that it's built in, that you don't see it, that it blocks and does things before you have to do. And on the other hand, they give you all of the tools and give you a tool belt to make sure that you can do whatever you need to do if you're advanced enough to handle that. And sometimes we do see customers that that can handle that, but often I would hope that Microsoft builds in a lot of stuff into their products and services early without us having to touch it, and they will just take care of it. And that was actually my personal greatest announcement this week, was the automatic attack disruption functionality in Microsoft Defender for endpoint. Wow, that's a long name.
Sentence.
It's like, what acronym is that? But automatic attack disruption, like, that is cool, because that means that we will be intervening, blocking on the OS level when we see a couple of combined signals from the vendor AV, from the EDR engine, maybe some custom feeds, and it will block it before you have some alert that you need to click block on. And those things will help. They will matter. Like, we've seen a session from Dart this week here, the response team that Microsoft has, and they were showing like minutes, sometime like within 2 minutes, a hacker would get from initial access to a next step. And you don't have the time, even in a good working SOC, you don't have 2 minutes. That's short. That's really short. So having these types of automatic security measures, they mean a lot to our customers, I guess.
Yeah. Another example I like to add to that is that they add more tools to the toolbox, but you're still the one who should decide to pick up the tools and use them. For example, when you're handling Linux VMs in Azure, for example, you're using SSH to SSH into those machines. And, well, the best practice is to use private and public keys instead of passwords, but that's still a hassle. So you have to manage and transfer keys, implement them into your putty client or what other client have you. And it's still old school way, actually. Nothing has changed in the last couple of, 10, 20 years on that part. And now they added support to do SSH over the Azure CLI command prompt and through the Azure portal, so that you now have RBAC and PIM and MFA on the SSH session added on top of that. And that's amazing. So, but you're still the one responsible to implement it, of course, and configure that. And maybe in the future, they may make some changes, maybe in the defaults, when you create a new Linux VM, that is the standard. You see that happen last couple of years already. But that's, I think, also a good example of them helping us to make it safer.
Yeah, and you see those teams growing to each other, right? So what you're telling now is that there are multiple teams working on making it safer from multiple perspectives, integrating their services into the Azure portal, Azure CLI. There's one more thing that I would like to bring to the table, Joey. Confidential computing. Are we excited about confidential computing? And specifically,
that's
data in use.
Are we excited? What Mark said, in a couple of years, it's just going to be compute.
Yeah.
Not confidential computing anymore. It's rather a complex topic. It still is. But I think that what I'm figuring out with Microsoft, in the last couple of years, they make it much easier for you. It's not plug and play, but it's almost there with Microsoft. So yeah, I cannot give a definite answer on your question about what I think about confidential computing, but yeah.
I'm curious, do you see it being used? Because confidential compute already existed.
Yeah.
It is now extended feature. Do you use it? Do you see that, customers?
We have some customers that are asking for it for regulatory compliance or for privacy purposes, but not to the extent of data in use that is being encrypted, right?
Yeah.
So we were actually talking after that session that it must be very CPU intensive to continuously keep encrypting and decrypting those kind of workloads. So you have data at rest, and then you have data in transit, and then data in use, and we're actually that maybe even better for me to ask a question to you security guys. So are there actual use cases out there, because you talk security with your customers, that where encryption of data in use is needed?
Yeah, I think, of course, the most obvious answer will be regulated industries. Like if you're like in healthcare or government and you're doing PII data, so privacy-related data or personal data, those things quickly and often, of course, need to have protections. Nowadays, often by law even, that something is needed. So those are the obvious use cases. But like Joey said, like as a person, me, myself, having data everywhere, I would hope and I would like all of those providers to use that data very in a private way. And so I would hope that confidentiality, will be everywhere in the next 10 years, because it is your data, even if it is maybe just your, I don't know, preference on something, or maybe it's data about not too personal, but still they could be linked together to profile you, and you don't want to have that data on the street. So I think, of course, today regulated industries, companies that are, I don't know, on a stock exchange or something, that means that they will be hit quite hard by either laws or the public if they get breached. And they will want to consider confidentiality computing. But compute is one thing, like you said, data and data transport, like they show it in the keynote, like now being able to do secure transport, to do attestations. Those are actually pretty meaningful things. And the analogy that Mark did to TLS 15 years ago was quite striking. Because we had unsecured connections and everyone's like, oh, TLS is complicated and we're not going to do it everywhere. Like, it will be hard-pressed to find today to have security or connections that are unsecured. Like most will be moving towards secure, and it's almost seamless in servers or applications or services. So I'm not too worried. I think it's spot on. Like in the next 10 years, this will become the de facto standard on compute. But today we still need a skill set, and it'll be interesting to see which vendor, which type of technology becomes most prevalent, because you talked about NVIDIA, about AMD, the Intel SGX with enclaves. I'm not hoping it will be a war between things that you need to choose like either technology. I'm hoping they will have some sort of, like you said, consortium that
open standard.
that they will come up with open standards.
Yeah.
So, Joey, when you're going home, what's the first thing you're going to try, or you're going to build, or you're going to inspire your colleagues about?
Containers.
In general.
Yeah.
So it's containerization for you.
Yeah.
The next couple of months.
Yeah.
I still see that used way too less in practice. People are still lifting and shifting VMs into the cloud and installing new Windows servers and moving applications onto it without thinking about containerization.
Sadly, that's true.
That's true.
Also my experience. Yeah.
For me, it's Defender for DevOps, and also that the Linux example I gave earlier.
Yeah.
I see large corporations still use direct SSH and even direct RDP into servers, although it being stepping stone machines, it's still not a safe thing to do. And when you use your RBAC controls with PIM and MFA, that's a way safer thing to do. So that's something I'm going to pitch with my customers, definitely.
I think some customers will be very happy with that.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, it's always a hassle to set it up, and you have people have to change.
Yeah,
that's always a difficult thing to do. But in the end, I think they will be happy, definitely.
Yeah, for me, it's really about the OT side, so the industrial security, and the connection that Defender for IoT now has with Microsoft Sentinel, because we see so many customers that are asking for it. And I think if you relate it today to, for instance, the war that's going on in Ukraine, vital infrastructure and protecting vital infrastructure is not something from a distant future. It's something that has to be done now. And I think Microsoft today has all of the means to do it. And I think we're very excited to get that in the hands of some of our customers, make sure they get protections outside of their Office network. So that's something that's quite high on my radar at this point.
Yeah, for me, it's something that we learned today within one of the breakout sessions, or the table sessions actually, is that going to the Azure Management Agent, or Azure Arc, it's something that Microsoft will be pushing in about 2 years, that we will have to, we will be enforced to update from the Azure Monitor Agent towards the Azure Management Agent.
The application of AMA.
But there's actually no real reason to start that conversion right now, because Microsoft will automatically help us with going towards other agents. I see some shaking heads here.
Yeah, well,
Tell me I learned something good today.
no, you definitely, because it's going end of life, I think already next year. So sure, you can delay that, but good luck next year when it goes end of life and you still have a lot of machines migrating. So my advice is already for I think 6 months already with customers. Don't use MMA anymore unless it's really necessary. Mm-hmm. And up until, well, there are still, to be honest, a couple of features which are still in preview for AMA. Yeah. But I'm still pushing AMA instead of MMA.
Actually, Sentinel.
Yes, that's true. That's true. That's true. Yeah. So for Sentinel and particular cases, we can't do without MMA just yet. If we wanted to be general available, everything across the board. So that's true, but still.
So your advice as a professional
I consider MMA legacy already.
Okay, legacy.
Is there something you guys want to put out there before we're going to wrap this one up?
Well, I would suggest everybody to watch back the session of Mark Russinovich about the Azure infrastructure, how they set up data centers. Mm. They build 50 to 100 data centers a year, and they're now dipping the motherboards into liquid fluids. It's amazing. You have to really rewatch that. And also the session with Mark and Scott Hanselman was amazing about Zoomit. So
on-stage programming.
Yeah, two fun sessions. But really entertaining to look at. And obviously, I'm going to ask for approval at Wortell to set up a couple of those Ultron Mega Godzilla Beast VMs as well, because I want to play with
Tetris or Breakout.
Breakout on the Task Manager.
Well, we have Chief Ninja Cat here, so we can. We can put it on camera if you said yes or no, but no, I will not do that to you.
I think,
No, I think like Koos said, everything, and that's the beauty of a hybrid conference. You can view all of the content afterwards, so do go ahead. And I think maybe just a plug, if you want to get connected over the next year with Microsoft Security in the Netherlands, there's a wonderful meetup I do every month where people can come for free. We have wonderful speakers. So if you do want to continue on some of this fun, also consider, of course, subscribing to your podcast, but then doing a meetup if you want to do an in-person one.
Joey?
I am going along with Koos. You have to watch the presentation of Mark about the Azure announcement. That was really awesome.
Yeah.
And I guess we will wrap it up being inspired about Ignite. Thank you guys so much for joining this podcast today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Rolf.
And well, hope to see you guys in the future.
See you soon.
Have a safe flight home.
Cheers.